Hello, my name is Megan Benavides, and this is Learning is Not Quiet Explains Mudshark by Gary Paulson. Gary Paulson is one of my all-time favorite young adult and children's authors just because he writes for everybody. He writes for younger students, older students, he writes harder material, he writes more nature stuff, more city, urban stuff, and I really respect his writing. Hatchet is one of my favorite books of all time, and I also really enjoy Mudshark, which is the book we're going to talk about and attack today. The good thing about Mudshark is that it has a little bit of humor woven throughout the novel, and I like that it starts immediately with that humor in the book. And I gave this book to two struggling readers this year, and they opened it up, and the first thing that happened out of their mouths was that they giggled. And that's kind of the happiness that you want to inspire with reading. So without further ado, here is Mudshark. So let's talk first about how to use this particular product. You can use it as a literature circle, which is how I have most recently used it. I gave different books to different groups of students in my class, and I had them read it as a grouping, and they would do these activities by themselves, and then they'd come back together, and I would give them sentence stems like I think, I believe, I agree, I disagree, those kinds of basic sentence stems for them to talk about the answers to their questions when they came together. You can also do this as a whole class read aloud, which means that you could use this notebook for kind of accountability or something to teach mini lessons while doing a whole class read aloud. Again, I really like having notebooks for whole class read alouds because I think it keeps everyone, especially in upper elementary grades, focused and accountable. And it also gives you a common text to talk about all of these different standards. You can also use Mudshark, this activity book, as independent work. This is especially for students who are going to be gone on a vacation for a long time, when there is an outbreak like we are going through right now when I'm recording this video. It can be great for independent work as well. All right, so let's get into this novel. When you first open the product, the first thing your students are going to see is a pre-writing activity. I really like starting with pre-writing, especially in some of my notebook book clubs, because it really gets the students to predict before they even read any of the text. It's something that it leaves no excuses for the student. They can do this no matter what level reader they are. I also like that this one kind of engages us in what the genre is and introduces that word of mystery. What elements make up a mystery? Without reading the book, take a look at the cover. What do you expect to find or experience when reading this novel? So rather than showing you an exemplar notebook, I'm going to show you an example of a struggling reader and kind of walk you through her process as she attacked this novel. So this is my student's notebook. She did struggle with this a little bit. She admitted to me that this is only the second chapter book she has read in her life by herself. The first one was another book club that we did earlier in the year. So when I read this student's book, I see that mysteries have clues and guesses, and I expect those to be there to be robbers and things in Mudshark, which is not a great answer. I'm seeing a couple grammatical errors, but a couple things that I like about this, and I just want to show you that you can still use this style. You can still hold students to this rigor, even if they are struggling readers. So what I do like about this notebook is that she says that she expects there to be clues, and she's going to be looking for clues in this mystery, which is an important part of that genre. I'm not sure where she got the robbers from. Maybe that's something that I would ask her to keep writing about. Why do you expect mysteries to have robbers? Maybe she watched a mystery movie that had a robber in it before. And so while this is a good answer, it hits some elements of mystery, I would have wanted her to go more into the cover, more into the author, and making more predictions than just that it will have clues. So this would be about a 2 out of my 4 expectation. So then with each section of the book, you'll see that there are open-ended comprehension questions. Some of my notebook style book clubs have open-ended comprehension questions. Some of them have multiple choice comprehension questions. This one is more open-ended to work on that sentence structure, that grammar, along with that understanding and responding to the story. One thing I really worked with this group this year who did Mudshark as a literature circle on was writing incomplete answers and making sure that they had sentence stems for questions that they didn't know how to start. So sometimes we would read the questions together if you have a really struggling group, and you can come up with sentence stems as a group. So I'm going to model how I would do that with this particular set of questions. How does the author hook the reader in the beginning of the story? So what I did before my students sat down and tried to do these questions was we talked through these questions. So what does that word hook mean? And that's a word I use a lot in my teaching. It is something that grabs the reader's attention. So I might have my students write grabs reader's attention above that. And then to set up our sentence stem, I would have all my students in this group write down the author hooks the reader in the beginning of the story by, and then when they read the chapter, all they have to do is fill in the end of that sentence. Ideally, you want students to be doing this by themselves. This is just kind of an adaptation for struggling readers. What is your first impression of Mudshark? What does the book tell us about him, and what can you infer? So infer, and I have a whole product on my store on inferences that I had gone over with my class before I attempted this novel study. But I would remind my students and have them kind of think through and remember that infer means like a prediction, but using clues. So I would say that we would write down again our sentence stem. My first impression of Mudshark is, and then on the second line, I can infer, so they're answering both pieces of that question. What is Mudshark's real name? Why is his nickname Mudshark? And what do you think this says about his characterization? Again, I have a whole product in my store on character traits and characterizations. Check it out. I did go through that with my students before I attempted this product, but it's a great little mini lesson to throw in on the way as well. Again, we would say Mudshark's real name is his nickname. He is nicknamed Mudshark because his character traits are. Again, answering all three parts of that question, making sure they're writing incomplete sentences. Sometimes his outfit fit in the way with everyone else dressed, and sometimes it didn't. Once he wore a green wool sweater that had a yellow, leather diamond stamped with the head of a poodle in the middle of the chest. It was ugly and broken teeth chewing rotten meat. But by the end of the day, everybody in school wished they had one. Had a green wool sweater with a yellow leather diamond and poodle on it too. What does this tell us about Mudshark's character? Well, I had a really hard time reading that quote from Mudshark. So again, I would pull my students aside and I would talk to them about the fact that this tells us that Mudshark is somewhat of a leader. He's a trendsetter. He pretends not to care deeply about what other people think of him. And that was actually a really good discussion I had with my girls who were reading this book at the time, is that we sat around and talked about what makes someone cool, what makes someone a good leader, and that was something they responded to. So again, this is kind of the answer key to look for to go through with your students. I started doing the sentence stems after this particular one because you can see my students were not writing incomplete sentences. One thing I do like is that my students were underlining a couple things, and I can tell that she was paying attention. This vocab practice at the bottom gives you a lot of bang for your buck, I think. A lot of standardized test prep, unfortunately, involves this kind of vocab practice, and when we can really focus on novels and not just boring worksheets, I think that that's a win for everybody. So that's kind of why I include that in there. Okay, again, I have a whole context clues lesson available in my Teachers Pay Teachers store, so feel free to check that out as well. These are all things that I go through with my students at the beginning of the year before I get to these kind of novel studies where we break these kinds of concepts down a little bit further. So one thing that I've included in this book study is focus questions, focus mini lessons that hit the typical standards, the typical vocab that students need for almost every grade level, either of upper elementary school or early middle school. So for the inciting incident is a call to action. And in our district, we call it a call to action. So that's what I have them underline, highlight, whatever crazy. This is what gets the story in motion. What do you think the inciting incident is in the story? What actions do you think the characters are going to take after this moment? So again, this is my student. I could tell that I told her to write more. I'm going to try to zoom in on her writing. So it says, this is about Mudshark, who is going to save people with his superpowers. His superpower is that he is fast, and his little something, his powers move, and the custodian, spelled with a K, is going in with a shovel for it. And I think the school is old and broken because he has a shovel. So it might be, again, easy to attack this student because this isn't the level of rigor that I would usually see from my students or usually expect from them. But for this person, comprehension questions are new to her. So I like that she's at least answering the questions accurately. That's, again, a modification you can make for struggling readers. Just get some kind of accurate forward motion answer. So again, well, I'm not on the right page, am I? So this is not the level of rigor I would expect from most of my students, but I like that I can tell that she at least put a lot of effort into it, that she tried to get that full half page that I was asking of her, and she at least understands what the inciting incident is. So next is perspective. And perspective is a really difficult thing for students to get. I'm working on building a perspective product in my Teachers Pay Teachers store, so look for that coming soon. So again, I would take this, another way to kind of do this is to have this group meet and talk about these big ideas or these mini lessons that you talk about as a group, and then have them go attack these questions independently. So that's how I approached this one. And as a class read aloud at the time, we were reading Wonder. And so I kind of connected that to Wonder for these students to make it a little bit easier to understand, what does that mean I'm getting into someone else's perspective? So again, this is my struggling student answer. She wrote from the perspective of the bird. Again, not perfect, but I can tell that she's using some of the vocab from the bird. She is writing out. I like that she has some some capital letters at the beginning of her sentences, some punctuation. And so those are the glows that I would be looking for as I go through about this notebook. The next one talks about conflict. So that's another mini lesson. And again, you can even do this with a whole class, have a conflict mini lesson, and then individual. Go work in your groups, go work in your partnerships on answering this question, and continue reading the story, answering the response questions. The next mini lesson is on characters. Again, there's a great character trait product in my store. Feel free to use that in your mini lesson, and then have the students do independent work, keep reading, respond, and vocab. That's kind of the whole flow of this book club if you're using this as a preview. So that's the big idea of Mudshark. Hopefully that helps you go through this product a little bit easier, helps you decide whether this product is a good fit for your classroom. It can be, again, used with accelerated readers. It can also be used with students who are struggling a little bit. I really like that this book starts off with a plunger and a toilet and a hamster loose in the school and just kind of goes crazy from there. I really like that this story embraces perspective and character development. And what I really like about this book club is it gives you, the teacher, the opportunity to review those essential tested skills, those things that you know your students need to learn, while still using novel studies, while still using literature circles, while still just kind of taking those topics and shoving them into interesting books. So hopefully this helps you in your classroom.